Look, if you live in a close community like Chardon, Ohio, you think you have a pretty good idea or handle on what's going down on your street. You know who keeps the yard pristine, you know who leaves their trash out bins out an extra day, and you know who keeps to themselves. But back on Wednesday afternoon, specifically May 20th, 2026, around 3:30 in the afternoon, a single emergency call completely blew the lid off a quiet neighborhood. A Chardon police cruiser pulls up to the house. Now, while the exact reason for the initial presence of the police yet isn't public, but while officers were inside checking things out, they realized they are dealing with a severe medical crisis. They immediately radio for a rescue squad. The resident inside, a woman estimated to be between 45 and 60 years old, suffering from a sudden severe head bleed. Paramedics load her into the squad and rush her to the hospital for emergency evaluation. Standard medical protocol. But when those doors were open, a massive hidden crisis came to the daylight. The home was completely rattled with piles of uncollected trash, while we're talking about mountains of garbage that had clearly not been put out on the curb for collection for a very long time. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Jones. Today we're unpacking a local situation that has quickly spiraled into what people are calling the Chardon Pro Se, the unfolding town narrative. Because right now the street is in an absolute uproar. A local neighbor named Mr. Redding spoke out about the public hazard right next door, and the citizen media page called the Chardon Pro Se posted about it publicly. And immediately the community fractured. Today we are doing a 60-40 deep dive. 60% is strictly legal analysis of the massive, bureaucratic finger-pointing between county, health, and city services and how code enforcement actually works when a property owner gets cited. And the other 40% is a raw commentary of the sudden backlash, the digital fallout, and the fascinating, hypocritical comments left on the Chardon Pro Se thread. Let's talk about it. So let's look at what happened the second the story went live after the May 20th incident. The local citizen page, Chardon Pro Se, puts the details out there. Neighborhoods start sharing it. The comment sections instantly turn into an absolute toxic battlefield. Right now, Mr. Redding and the Chardon Pro Se page are taking major heavy flack from a huge chunk of the community. If you read the thread, people are furious that this was a posted publicly forum on the situation here. One commenter literally typed out, "Why do people like you insist in speaking for others? How about minding your own business?" This young woman has struggled with her mental health problems for years until last week nobody ever paid attention to her. Please delete this. She's a human being who deserves privacy. They're treating this strictly as a digital ethics issue, accusing Mr. Redding of publicly shaming a sick woman. But wait until you hear about how local government handled it before the internet got involved. According to local sources now, a concerned citizen actually reached out to the public health department first. And what did the county health department do? They basically told the concerned citizen to go kick rocks. They claimed that their hands were tied completely because there is no housing code that they can legally enforce in this scenario. Just pure bureaucratic deflection, if you ask me. But does the citizen stop there? No. This citizen went to the Chardon City Services, and the city sang a completely different tune. City Services looked at the situation and said, actually, yes, we have a specific code against this, and we're going to handle it. And did they? The city services stepped in, bypassed the county's excuses, and went straight after the actual owner of the property. And the owner was formally cited, and that the legal pressure actually worked because on May 27th, the property owner hired a professional cleanup company to finally come out and start remediating the situation of the biohazard. But that same day also took a turn. The neighborhood tension boiled over from the keyboard warrior onto the pavement. While the cleanup crew was out there working, Mr. Redding was aggressively and verbally assaulted right outside. And who did it? One of those self-proclaimed concerned neighbors and her husband. They ambushed him on the street, screaming at him for making the situation public. They think about this, the irony here. They're screaming about compassion and privacy, but yet they're out on a public street verbally assaulting a neighbor who is just trying to protect his home from a rat infestation and a fire hazard. Which brings me to my next point, the core question and the system of the timeline here. Here's the absolute core of this entire story that drives me crazy when I look at this local commentary. On the exact same Chardon Pro Se post, another neighbor chimed in completely and flipped the script on the keyboard warriors. And she wrote, or he or she, I don't know who they are, I would like to let you all know that I've helped this woman many times, whether it be pick up items for her from the store or just get things like pop and cigarettes. She did come over a few times to ask for garden tools to use. She has used my cell phone to call her dad when hers was broken. She has also walked over just to have a conversation. For the most part, she just wanted to be left alone and just be. I will agree she has done very odd things while outside, and anyone that has driven by can attest to that. But then the neighbor dropped the hammer. They asked, my question to some of you who have seen her acting odd, why didn't you stop in and help or call the authorities to try to get her help? You seem to think she needs. Instead, it's easier to point the finger at other people, right? I guess if the trash and the garbage is not right near your home, who cares, right? Now, this comment here blows the entire situation wide open because it clarifies a massive legal truth. The city of Chardon had absolutely no idea this was happening until the emergency call on May 20th. They weren't sitting on old reports. They were completely in the dark. That brings us to the brutal legality of why our system is entirely reactive. Neighbors are asking why the city didn't step in months ago. Well, legally, they couldn't. We live under the Fourth Amendment. A person's home is their castle. Even if neighbors notice somebody acting oddly outside or whisper among themselves that she has a mental issue, Chardon City Services cannot just force the way into an adult-aged home just based on neighborhood gossip. Unless the trash is visibly spilling out into the front yard, creating an obvious exterior zoning violation, the city is legally blind to what is happening inside the four walls. In the state of Ohio, an adult has a constitutional right to the autonomy. You have the legal right to live however you want behind the front door, even if it's in filth. As long as there's no dependents being abused, social services can knock on the door, but a competent adult has the legal right to say, no thank you, get off my porch. So the city didn't know what, because the law completely protects her privacy right up until the exact physical crisis happens. The head bleed forces entry, the entry reveals a hazard, and to Chardon City Services' credit, the moment they found out on May 20th, they acted immediately and cited the owner, but it shouldn't require a medical disaster to trigger a cleanup. Now, this brings me to my next point, the neighborhood hypocrisy. This brings us back to the sheer hypocrisy of the community uproar. People are shouting down Mr. Redding and the Chardon's Pro Se throats, acting like this woman's privacy was perfect, intact until last week. But as the one neighbor pointed out, anyone driving by could see her acting oddly outside. The neighborhood knew she was struggling. But nobody actually stepped in to help solve the root of the problem. Instead, the neighborhood practiced what I call a passive blind eye for compassion. They tolerated her mental illness from a distance because, as the commenter said, the trash and garbage is not right near your home. Who cares, right? They only started caring about the privacy when Mr. Redding and the Chardon Pro Se made this physical reality of her crisis impossible to ignore. The uproar on May 27th, where Mr. Redding verbally was assaulted on his own street, wasn't about protecting a sick woman. It was about neighbors feeling guilty that their collective failure to help this woman was suddenly exposed to the entire town. It is easier to yell at some guy pointing out the fire than to admit you watched the house burn. Am I right? So, as it stands right now, This resident is undergoing a medical evaluation. Chardon City Services successfully forced the property owner's hand. A professional cleanup crew company has been working since the 27th to clear out the hazard, but the neighborhood remains completely fractured. Key word there, people. This case proves that our local systems are entirely reactive. We don't have a mechanism in local government to gently intervene into an adult's life before it reaches a breaking point, which is so sad. So instead, the city has to wait for a medical disaster to happen, and then the neighborhood fights online about who has more empathy. Come on. But I want to turn back to you guys. Look down your own street. If a neighbor on your block was drowning in mental health crisis, would you step in and try to reconnect with them and get them help, or would you wait for a rescue squad to show up and then yell at the person who tries to clean up the aftermath? Where do you draw the line? Does Mr. Redding have a right to protect his home? Or should Chardon Pro Se should have kept quiet and kept out of it for the respect of everyone's privacy? Let me know what you think. Head over to the pages, drop a comment on this episode, and let's talk about it. If you appreciate these real, raw world breakdowns of local battles, make sure to hit subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and share this episode with your friend. Till next time, check on your neighbors, look out for each other, and thanks for listening.